Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media production. And our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today it's going to be questions about media production. So we had scheduled a Blackmagic Cloud. I had a little trouble with getting the expert lined up properly. So we're going to push that off a little bit and do Q&A. So we will go as long as you keep asking questions or until 2 hours, whichever goes first. So anyway, so throw those questions into Mukana. You can throw those questions in. You can vote on those questions and chat amongst yourselves if you'd like. If you're not in Mukana, you can actually use the QR code here. This is askofficehours.global. So you can go to askofficehours.global and ask your question there. It will go into a hopper and we'll move it in. You can ask that 24/7. So go ahead and throw those questions in if that makes the most sense for you. And let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Bill, what do we have?
We start with Andy Kokendorfer, this morning from Vieira, Florida. I'm building a rack with multiple M2 MacMinis and a one-rack unit Sonnet enclosure. Is it okay to mount these in a rack against each other, or should I leave a small gap, an air gap, between the Sonnet enclosures to vent them? To be deployed in a server room? Thanks.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think if you do the math, you can divide that into three, and it does leave room for some spacing. And spacing is always a good idea because you don't want things bumped into each other. So have at it.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, you can mount them next to each other, no problem. It's always a good idea to leave maybe a half RU on the bottom side, not the top for the Mac Minis.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, half RUs are hard. So if it depends on what you're putting in there. Usually it's by an RU. But I would say I think we've stacked probably 3 or 6 of them. 3 or 4 levels of them without any trouble at all. And those were the older Intel versions. So I think with the new M2s, I don't think you're going to have any problem with stacking them on top of each other. Next question.
Ian Alford in London is up next. Amazing fireside chat last night. Thank you for bringing it to us. Can you please give a deep dive into how you're getting the questions into Mimolive from Mukana?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me pop this up here. And what I'm going to do is I got to jump into let's see here. I got to load this question. I'll load your question actually into the system so that you can see it. So I'm loaded. There's a button that I have in another interface that lets me load into the lower third. So if I'm going to cut to this. So this is Mimolive that you're seeing here. So what I have is, I have the, starting soon. All the stuff was very basic. I always joke that the first is the worst. And so this was the first time we've done this. And so me trying to do it all by myself with a little help from Laura Thompson, who managed the questions on the back end, which was key. But I wanted to try to do all the production as much as I could by myself as I could. So hold on 1 second. So anyway, so what I had here is, thank you for watching here. Now I have what I started here. You're going to see this interface right now because it's kind of a video loop, and it says Michael Solo because this is usually done for Michael Krasny's show. So I started rebuilding this. I copied it and kind of rebuilt it with a new background. If I wanted to do 2-ups, I just have it set in here. That's where the background would pop in. And then if I had a guest, if I had Colleen talking a little bit, we had that there. So there's a couple different setups there. Now, what I did here is with question, you'll see that this pops in there. So that question there, the way that that's actually being keyed is it's just a web page. So there's we have within Mukana, we've always had a lower third. What we did add here so that this would work is an alpha channel. So if you look at it here, this is what it looks like here. This is an HTML5 with an alpha channel. So I wanted to avoid having to use an API if I didn't have to. I wanted to be able to just build a general purpose one. And I have a lot of choices here. So I can, you can see I have a lot of controls that we've put in over the years. So there's a lot of controls to color and so on and so forth. So I was really able to match the colors to what I actually wanted there. So that's all it really is. And so basically what happens is that it is inside of Mukana, I just Laura hit send to lower third, and it pops up on that screen. And what's nice about it is if I like to just kind of show you again, it won't do anything if there's not, so right now you can see that You can see this up here, but if I take that down, so if I say, oh, I don't want to have that in a lower third here, cancel here. Oh, well, it's a little hard. There's a button that I'm missing right now because we just started adding things. So anyway, but I can take that out and it'll just be a gap down there as well. So there's a couple different ways of making that actually work. It was all part of a test of us just trying to figure out, how light can we go. I will say that trying to do a show and talk on it, hosting the show and doing and cutting the show is hard to do all at one time. There's a little bit of a process there, but I'm going to keep trying to do it for a little while. It's mostly just so I can build up the system in a way that I like. So we want to be able to do workshops in, kind of a light way. And so this was an experiment with that. And Colleen was kind enough to be the guinea pig on how to make that actually happen. She was amazing. It's up there on our website last night. I mean, the conversation was fantastic. And so I would definitely recommend checking it out. If you're into streaming, it was deep, and it's kind of mind-boggling stuff that she's talking about there. So anyway, so it was really good. I think I need to work on where I put the interface and some of the other bits and pieces, but it was pretty successful overall. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I just wanted to compliment you both. I mean, it was really an extraordinary evening of being able to dive deep into streaming technology, and it's such a key area of everything that everybody is heading towards on the web. And Colleen Henry is an amazing thinker, and I think you brought out all of her best qualities in terms of that deep understanding of how these enabling technologies that make the whole internet work really are. It just was fascinating. I had a great time watching the part of it I was able to.
Yeah, we discussed it a little bit in After Hours this morning. We were all up, some of us were up buying Vision Pro headsets this morning, so we were talking a little bit about it. And I know that there were some comments that we had about, I think I left her on a big screen probably longer than I needed to, and there's a bunch of other things. But those are all things, again, that were, you'll see it changing dramatic, over time. What I want to do is be able to do up to 6 people, not any more than that, nothing like our panel here. And that's all ZoomISO, just sending that out. But, so it's a pretty, the goal was to make sure that I could do it all in one computer, so that the whole thing happens in one computer. I think there's some frame rate issues. I think that might be what I'm using, all the different apps that are running all at one time. So I'm going to kind of work through that. But I think overall it was a pretty good test. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Alex, in the past, you've always been I won't say proponent, but you've said that, you could just do a luminance key. Is adding HTML5 a relatively new thing to Mukana?
This week.
so relatively new.
Relatively new. It was, it was one of those things that, it was just on the list of things to do that had been sitting on that list for a while. And I finally brought it up and said, Chris, how long will this take? And he goes, let me take a look at it. And like a half an hour later, it was working. It's like a flag, like it was nothing to turn it on.
And how long has Oliver supported HTML5 keyable pages?
For a long time. I mean, I think
really?
that for
I had never heard of it before Tuomo.
Right. Yeah. The HTML5 support is something that's really common in OBS, and anything that's able to load a web page in the last couple of years has been able to do the HTML5 with an alpha channel. So that's not new. It was new for us because we just decided to finally turn it on. And I thought it would take more than it took Chris to do it. So anyway, so we have it now. And again, I still want to work on doing the same thing we're doing with Tuomo with SPX, which is that, developing. Someone's clicking, I think. I can't.
That's me. I'm sorry. I'm holding a screwdriver while nervously clicking.
I do want to keep on working on APIs so we can drive that information, for instance, directly. There's more we could do if we drove it directly into Mimo. So I'm going to work with Oliver to make sure that we can deliver him the information live like we do with SPX. But the idea that I could go, oh, you have a software switcher and you can key HTML5, this will just work. Like I felt like that was just a great add to have within the system.
Yeah, the nice thing about having it be HTML5 instead of a adjusted luminance key is you get to control the output of it. I mean, you get to control the final look because it comes with the alpha channel. The other thing I wanted to mention, you had said you brought up the HTML5 thing with Chris, and by the way, that's not me. That's a much smarter Chris. I I work with a developer who does our website backend for our content delivery system. And I always make a point to say, hey, look, I don't want you to do any of this yet, but I want to tell you, this is our timeline. This is our horizon. And because sometimes he just looks at it and he goes, oh, dude, I can do that in a half hour.
Yeah, my conversation generally with Chris almost all the time is, how hard would it be to do this? And then if he comes back and says, I don't make, because I know with Chris, we've worked together now for I think 8 years. I know that with Chris, if I say I need this to be done, he'll just stop sleeping and get it done. He'll just do whatever is necessary. Right. But I also want to leave him with, if he says, oh, that's really hard, then I want to be able to or that's going to take me 2 or 3 weeks, or I have to think about that for a little while. That's totally fine. I just go, because with Mukana, it's in constant development. It's just constantly getting better. And we have shows, I have a show next week. So then he builds a whole bunch of stuff for the show. And so there's, it just depends on what, but I try to use, to your point, use a light hand on that, because this isn't a mission critical feature. It's just something that I think would make things a little bit better. Yeah, and then I found it's hard to turn it off. So I was like, okay, because we haven't used it very much. We haven't used it that way for a long time. We used to use it more often, and with Luma keying and green screen keying and everything else. And I was like, oh, this would be much easier. And now what I need is something that's now I need to go kind of be able to send it back to key fill some way. So that's my next little project. Next question.
Hasma Gajar is coming in from Cape Town, South Africa. I had a fright when I could not find my Pluggable used with the MacMini in the past for ISO video. If not Pluggable, what solutions are possible for ISO video? He wonders if he needs needs a display attached to the host machine.
I'll go ahead, Courtney.
Well, if you have an iPad, you can use Sidecar. I think it still works for the latest version of the operating system on the Mac. And on the PC, if you have a Galaxy Tab 7, 8, or 9 and Windows 10 or 11, you can go wirelessly as an external display for your desktop. So look that up. So both of those can be used wirelessly or plugged in via USB to keep the tablet powered up. That's another solution. If you don't have one of these portable external screens, which I carry around all the time, that plug in over USB-C and can, as long as you have an open USB 3 port that has DisplayPort on it, you can plug them in over that. And it powers the screen up, and you can use it to extend your Mac desktop or your Windows desktop off onto that second screen and run your ISO images over there.
Yeah, and I think it depends on what you're trying to do. Are you trying to cut to that ISO, or are you trying to record the ISO? So one of the things to look at is whether if you're trying to cut to the ISO, there are a couple different options. One of the things that when I'm doing that, or when we're doing it for the show, we're using a Sonnet box and a quad or duo Blackmagic deck link, and that's going to send it out. The problem, I believe, and Chris Fenwick can probably correct me if I'm wrong, I do believe if you use the pluggables, you're still getting the orange dot. Is that true, Chris? Do you still get the orange dot? Because it's still considered an HDMI output, right?
So, yeah, I was going to say, Hasmuk, be careful about doing this, because Alex is just going to shame and ridicule you and say that the grown-ups use NDI or whatever, or SDI.
Did I?
No, but you have in the past.
I was trying to be gentle. But you get an orange dot out of that, don't you?
Yeah, but here's the thing. The fixed thing that you said doesn't work. It works. It's working for me.
Oh, you mean the
I don't know which one it is. One of them. I
thought Apple I think in the newest version, I thought Apple had disrupted that fix. So
I don't know, but Alex is going to shame you using SDI.
You can use it. I'm just saying, if you're having trouble with, if you couldn't find your pluggable, there's not a lot of ways to do it in the last minute. The other thing to remind yourself, though, to do is that you can do NDI from one machine to another, or Syphon from what I'm doing to get Colleen out into Mimolive is just Syphon. It's all on the same machine. Which I may change over time. Like if I think that I'm pushing the machine pretty hard, so I may have what I'm looking at is having, for instance, ZoomISO on one machine and a bunch of I may split this up to a couple machines to do it, just to take a little bit of the load off. Right now, it's all in one. I kind of like the challenge of doing it all in one machine because I like the idea that I could just open it up, give it in a bunch of internet, and be able to pull in a conversation with 6 people on a single Mac Studio, but we'll see. I just love the idea, so I'm afraid that I'm going to keep trying it for a while and see where it goes. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Juan C. Robles in Mexico City, Mexico, and his question is for you, Alex. So, how did the Apple Vision Pro buy go this morning?
And Jason, go ahead, Jason.
Mine went pretty well. It was an extremely easy onboarding. It was, look 4 directions to measure your face, and bam, it was just done.
Yeah, it was quick. I think I had mine ordered in the first 10 minutes, so it was pretty good. And mine was only delayed by a little bit because I was it's a big purchase, and I didn't want to put it on the credit card that I have on my Apple thing, and so I had to. And changing your credit card with Apple is a little complicated because they make it so easy. They just want to go, "Hey, this is easy. You can just now order." And I was like, "No, I don't want to use that card." But there was nowhere in the order in the cart to change your card, so I had to go back out, cancel the order, go back out, find the thing, come back in. To change my. I should have ordered. I had thought about it last night. I should have ordered something like $10 from Apple to make sure that I had the right card in there, but I didn't do that because and I was worried about speed. It turned out I still have it delivered. It should be delivered on the 2nd, so I didn't miss the window. I think that Marcelo, who we were talking to in after hours when we were ordering, I think he said there's 80,000 units, or that's what he had heard, 80,000 units floating around, and so it seems like a lot, but for a new brand, it could, and the dates were already slipping 20 minutes in. They're already slipping by a day. Go ahead, Chris.
So, question: you said you don't think the credit card fiasco ruined your chances to get one of the 80,000? You're okay.
I think it says I'm going to get it on the 2nd. So I'm
okay. And then the other question: and is that the first date that they're going to deliver them?
Yeah, that's the first date.
And is that February 2nd?
February 2nd, 2 weeks.
Wow. Okay. So nerds,
they're already here.
Nerds unite. Nerds unite. Then the next question is: you have to measure your face. How do you have to measure your face?
I ordered on my phone. Fortunately, I don't know how you would do it with a computer, but I ordered on my phone, and immediately popped up and said, "Turn your head up," and like you do with your iPhone to do for your ID.
Does it give you like simpler. A rating, like what size your face is, or does it just keep that information?
Small, medium, and large.
Heck. Do you think it's going to your head is really big? Like it was just like it was.
Do you think there's people going to be face shamed by how big their face is?
I think it popped up and said, "Look at your noggin. It's like a planetoid."
Like David Brady is going to say, "Sorry, we can't get you one."
They rate noses from Michael Jackson to Jimmy Durante.
Yeah, exactly. Would you look at his? He's going to be crying himself to sleep in his huge pillow. All right, next question.
Andy Kokendorfer is up next from Viera, Florida. Is there an auto-tracking pan-tilt zoom camera that would be suitable to capture conference breakout session presenters without an operator, following a presenter within the defined area, maintaining a medium close-up is desired?
Yeah, no, don't do that. don't do that. There are things that claim to do these. There are PTZs. They have all kinds of AI built into them. And they never work 100%. So I would, and this is one of those things that I will argue that it's 100% or it's 0%. Like it's not. This isn't something that if it kind of works, that means you've got a frame where nobody's there, and you look silly. The big thing is that, and the other thing I will say is that for most untrained speakers, maintaining medium close up is difficult because they walk too much, they wander, they have nervous habits, and so on and so forth. When we train speakers to speak on stage, we're pretty specific. We're like, this is the stage, and we'll say we're going to give you spikes. These are your spikes. This is these are the places that we want you to go, and we literally put the spikes on the floor. And we say, while you're making a point, so when you're talking about something you want people to think about, when you're setting something up, walk to another spike. Just walk over like, okay, and you're setting up the next thing that you're going to say. But when you want to make a point, be standing there for at least a couple seconds. When you want to say something that's important. And they'll be like, when do I do that? When you think that what you're saying matters. Like when it matters, just stand on one of these spikes. But stand there for a couple seconds before you do that. And what that's going to allow us to do is zoom our cameras into a waist shot or even a chest up shot. And so it's going to look really, it's going to look gorgeous. It's going to have short depth of field. You're going to look important on your iMag, and all of that's going to work really well. If you keep on wandering around all over the place, you're going to be in a waist up or wider knees up shot all the time because we can't keep track of you. And so that's the thing that we tell speakers all the time when they allow us to. Generally they don't, and then you send speakers wandering all over the place while they're talking. So when they're undisciplined like that and untrained, I wouldn't say undisciplined, I would say untrained. It makes it very hard to get a medium close-up shot of them, to make that actually happen. So I think that you're going to have, and generally, if you're talking about auto tracking people without any operators, I'm going to say that most of your speakers are probably untrained. So it's not the budget where for us, we're training people over months. To prep people for those kind of things, and so it's probably not the scale that you're talking about because we have $1 million of hardware in the room with them when they do that. So I think that's the thing I'd be very careful of. This is again what I would recommend and what we use for the most part is our minimum viable product for a room is one locked off camera that frames the entire stage and one that's operated by an operator, and that operator is always on a different platform. They're 3 feet up. And they've got a platform that holds their tripod and a platform that they stand on, and those are separated by about 2 inches. And they're following that speaker around. And you can always cut to wide, cut to them, cut to wide. That's minimum viable product. We like to add cameras on the wings and return cameras for the audience and all that other stuff. But I would say for a conference, you're going to find yourself that's the safest thing to do down that path. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, Alex covered most of the high points there. I would not use a PTZ with auto tracking because there's a little bit of a delay in there, and they don't do smooth startups and smooth stops as easily as they.
I will argue they can. They
can. They say they do.
They can do a lot of those things pretty well now. It's just that they hallucinate, kind of like AI. They just suddenly they're like, I lost the person. Or I've had them we had one because they were demoing this for us. So we had one camera that was sitting on at one time, and someone walked past the stage, so you saw their head for a minute as they walked past the stage, and the camera was like, "Hello, how's it going?" It just wandered off. There we go. And that's optical tracking. You can also do things that you can put things in their pocket, and then it really sticks with them.
And you can do. You would do that. I could do that. You can do that with, a head to toe shot or a cowboy, or head to knee shot. But when you get in tight in an MCU and you get a rocker up there, one of those people that's going, back and forth and back and forth.
Yeah.
It can get out of sync with them. And so they're going the opposite direction as the rock. And you want them to let them just rock within the frame. And that takes the intuition of a good camera operator to know when to move from holding your frame and going with them.
You go, Chris.
Alex, when you teach them about the spike marks, do you teach them about the basketball?
No, I haven't talked about basketball.
Somebody did a breakdown of one of the Apple keynotes where they had a freeze frame of every single person holding a basketball.
No, I do.
It's like they're trained. And today, what we're talking about is
someone trained to do that.
It was really obvious they were all doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, it's really, so what's funny is I try to be as light as possible when training speakers because they can build horrible habits of things that they think they should do that look really, if you repeat it over and over again like that, it's problematic. The thing that I spend the most time talking about is, eye contact, obviously, looking out to the audience and so on and so forth, and those spikes. Those spikes are super important in that process, and stop using teleprompters for your presentations and memorize them. like that's like if you at that level, it's just memorize them. You can have a teleprompter there as a backup, but most of the people we work with, I mean, the company that, again, I don't understand anything about their products, and I streamed all their stuff for a decade, but Salesforce does the best presentations. Like if you want to watch gold standard of how to put something together, they memorize everything, and they walk through the crowd, and they are the most adventurous group I've ever seen do that, and it's terrifying for me, and it's really hard to do in camera work because they're wandering through all these pools of light and everything else, and they wander through the crowd, but they I mean, they have that. That is part of their. I don't even know how you unforget all the things that they have to say, because they'll do like an hour presentation that's completely memorized. It's amazing. Go ahead, David.
I was just going to add. I think some of the AI based tracking stuff is a little too aggressive, in my opinion. What I've seen, nothing beats the wetware of somebody being able to track it.
Good wetware,
calling the shots. Yeah.
Yeah, like good wetware. Sometimes, there's one location in New York. I won't say its name, Javits. And that is that the contract is the electricians run the cameras, and so those are
I think I was part of that house for a bit.
Yeah. Anyway, next question.
Next one comes to us from Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, Canada. With respect to time code, what's the difference between record run and time of day, and why would you use one over the other?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I contend if you have more than one camera, you should always use time of day, because that way you can synchronize the cameras together. Record run just runs the time code when the cameras is running. In other words, while it's capturing frames. It increments the frame on the time code as it's running, and if you hit stop, it stops the time code at the last frame that you recorded, and then next time you start the camera, that's record run, and next time you start the camera, it picks up at the next frame that it was at when you stopped the camera. So there's no gaps in the time code. It runs continuously from shot to shot to shot to shot. That's great if you want to take a bunch of shots and put them in order automatically, and have a continuous time code between all the shots, but almost never is it used in production. Always use time of day. That way, everybody is on the same clock, so that if you start and stop your camera, you know where to come back on that clock, because the time code of where that particular take started is the same as everybody else's. And so you can sync them up using time code from camera to camera to a common timeline.
Go, Bill.
I'll just add a couple of things. Courtney got most of it. In the world of metadata and computers now, I have two things. If I'm using a human being to do time code notes on something, I'll tend to ask them to do record run, because not having those gaps makes it easier for a human brain to know which shot follows which without the gaps that are necessary when you do record run. Time of day, on the other hand, allows the metadata system to parse that into these were shot in the morning and these were shot in the afternoon. So sometimes you can automatically have these modern NLEs figure out where you shot things and turn it into easier to read human language, which would be very helpful for like a window dub for a client.
Go ahead, Chris.
I'll echo what Courtney said about if you have multiple cameras, you almost certainly want to use time of day. The only reason I can think of for using record run would be if you don't have anybody to log anything, if you don't have any way to take notes, and you're doing a bunch of, say presentations that all have to be like 5 minutes long. The record run will give you a hint. Oh, I hit record, we queued them, take about 5 seconds off. That's about how long that person's been going. So that might be one advantage to using record run. But yeah, multiple cameras, time of day. I haven't used anything but time of day in 15, 20 years maybe.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Lest we forget JamSync, you want to find your master time code source and JamSync all the cameras to it if you want them to be right on the money.
And remember, you need to do drop frame if you're doing time of day. Otherwise, it'll slowly drift. It will no longer be time of day. And what you always end up with is a couple of cameras that are not set that way. I will say that over a full day of shooting, oftentimes you may find that the record run is more accurate to the frame but I think that overall, just because we've seen inaccuracies because of that, just trying to keep track of that time of day. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and I would advise against using drop frame unless you're doing live television, where the clock has to actually show the current time, where you have to get in and out at exactly the same time as real time, because drop frame gets problematic when you get into post-production, if you're going to do post-production, because there's frame numbers, not frames, but frame numbers missing. And so calculations get tough when you're trying to string stuff together and sync them up with the drop frame. You want to go to drop frame at the end after everything's edited, and you throw away the production time code, and you create a timeline that is drop frame when you export, so that it has correct time. The time code matches the length exactly of the program.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Khalid Al-Jumaya in Hassa, Saudi Arabia. Good morning, office hours. Using the ATEM Mini, is there a way to blur part of the screen during live streaming? I looked at a Chrome extension called ZeroBlur that does it on the browser, but I need something that worked system-wide. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, it won't do it. You won't be able to do it in the switcher. In fact, most switchers can't do it. And the reason is because what you're asking for is what we call a convolution kernel. So the convolution has to compare, to do a blur, it has to compare pixels to pixels around it, and then create a matrix that manages that. And that's a different kind of processor than most of your switchers. So your switchers are really good at doing pixel math, which is this pixel over top of another pixel, or going up and down. Actually interacting with those pixels and comparing them to other pixels is usually outside of the spec of most processors that are working in real time. That are just dedicated to it, dedicated processors. Obviously, your CPU and GPU can do that. So you're going to be able to do that kind of thing in a software switcher, but typically not in a hardware switcher. Not all of them. The higher end ones might have those things, but you're not going to find that in an ATEM. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. Sensaphonics has an inline monitoring device that can measure how many decibels the user is experiencing through their in-ear monitors or headphones. Thoughts?
I'm not sure that would work. How does it? I guess I'm not entirely clear how it's going to pick that up, because what if I'm using bone conduction, or what if I'm I find that I get warnings from my, and maybe this is what this is there to fix. I get warnings from my phone all the time when I'm turning up my bone conduction, and I know that it's not too loud because it's not even going into my ears. Go ahead, Alex.
You actually have to use IEMs that are supported. They have a compatibility list because they actually calibrate them, and they do firmware updates to add new models there. A lot of popular high-end ones are in there in that list.
There you go. Yeah, good, Courtney.
Yeah, I was going to say, because it depends on the impedance of each inner monitor, you would have to calibrate for that. And so apparently that's what they do. But also, everyone's hearing is different. Some are much more sensitive to loud noises. And some people are,
but I think this is
haven't been to the audiologist or cleaning their ears out in a long time, and they're less sensitive. So
I think this is saying this is what the earphone, regardless of how sensitive they are, this is what the earphone is producing. This is what's coming out of it. So, I thought it was interesting to listen to when John was talking about yesterday, John Ross. We had a great day yesterday. We had John Ross in the morning, Colleen in the evening. But when he was talking about the fact of that 85 dB or 83 dB was going to be too much for, in certain kinds of music, as opposed to a movie going up and down, or if something's really compressed and everything's compressed up to there, it's unlistenable. And I've definitely been, I have a tendency to, during the trailers, not during the movie, but I'll have a tendency to open up my decibel meter on my phone, and just because, by the way, I have found my phone is plus or minus about a dB of a $1,500 calibrated monitor system. Like, I can open up my phone and get something that's 1, maybe 2 dB off of what that is. So I open up my phone and I just look at it. I'm like, okay, it's at 83 or 79 or whatever during because the trailers are the loudest. And so I'm always just kind of curious as to where it's at. Yeah, go ahead, David.
These in-ear monitors go to 11.
Nice. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada. I was watching This Week in Google and was wondering what quality mic is Leo using compared to the MV7 or the Stellar.
Yeah, Leo uses the Heil PR40, and I think we tested one of those in the show. It's a great sounding mic, a lot of great off-axis rejection, so it makes it a good radio mic inside of a studio where there's a lot of hard surfaces and so on and so forth. And it's Leo's been using it. He won it. So the story behind those Heils is he won the Heil. It must have been 2005. Maybe 2006, somewhere in that range. There was a podcast convention down in Anaheim. No, it wasn't down in Anaheim. It was in Orange County. And I was there. And I remember because I had kind of a bad thing happened to my eye. So or both of them, and so I was almost blind that week. But he won that Heil, and then he loved it, and then they've standardized on that. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
I think he was talking about it. Leo's this week is doing a show from his mom's house back east, so he's using a different mic, and I don't know what that mic is. He's not using the Heil PR40, but I noticed it as well.
Yeah, I can't remember what it is. I can't remember what he said he was using there.
Well, maybe we'll have to use Google image recognition and AI to take a picture still and see what it is.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
At the time that Leo won the mic, is it possible he was holding your raffle ticket also, and maybe you should have won that mic?
Maybe I wouldn't have been able to see it.
That's
so anyway,
my point.
yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Alex.
Hard to say exactly. I was looking at he did mention it was an AKG drum mic, and when I looked at it, it looks like an AKG P2. If you just Google that image there, it looks like that mic. $159.
Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington, United States says, what are the specs of the Mimolive machine that was used in the Fireside? Do you need a strong Mac to run it?
Yeah. So it's a Mac. It's that was a Mac Studio Max, not the Ultra, but the Max. I bought a little less of a Mac Studio, thinking that it was M1. It was the first one out, and I bought it the week it was released, I think, and I didn't buy the Ultra because I felt like I was going to get a Pro, and then when the Pro came out, I was like, I don't really need that right now, and so I've kind of hung on to it. So it has been, although I'll probably buy a Pro next, and mostly because I want to put cards in it so I can do outputs, and I don't have to have Sonnet boxes and all the other stuff out of it. So the Pro might make sense for me in the future. You do need a powerful box, mostly because I'm doing a lot of things, and so I am going to look at how do I split this up. So I'm going to, one of the things I was looking at is having ZoomISO, for instance, sit, because I do think that I may start pushing it. There's a little bit of a frame rate issue yesterday. So I think that I'm already, but I think restarting it, I think going to Safari instead of Chrome. Chrome tends to be a little bit of a resource hog, making sure I don't have Discord open, which I use kind of for information, to put it on another computer. So again, this is the first time I did it, and I realized I had also forgotten to restart. Like before the Michael Krasny show, I restart the whole computer and make sure that everything's kind of clean when nothing else is running, and that kind of thing. So I didn't do some of the stuff that I normally do, but I am doing a bunch of things in it as well. And so, but what I have been thinking about is doing, for instance, having the ZoomISO sit on one computer, sending over NDI. I don't even know if that helps because NDI has more overhead. So I don't know if it really is going to help, but I'm going to keep on playing with it. But that's why I'm doing it, is to, I find that I have a hard time figuring out how things should work until I do them. And so I just need to, you'll see more of these fireside chats with different folks as I try to, and hopefully slightly larger labs as I try to figure it out. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Alex, you should hold out for the P3 Pro because it's got to be just around the corner.
The P3 or the M3?
M3. So sorry.
Yeah,
Too much COVID.
No, I am waiting for the M3. so I'm probably going to get. The problem is I stopped buying anything because I was getting ready to buy this headset today. So I to make sure so that now I have the headset. Now I have to start saving again. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
You meant the thing and the deal. This was going to be very interesting.
We're talking about the specs of the Mac for Mimo.
I yield my time.
Next question.
Bo Cordell in Charleston, South Carolina says, let's say I'm doing a proof of concept for a new show that'll be viewed in YouTube and or Twitch. Is there a good safe overlay example that will show me where not to build my show graphics?
Here's the problem is that it changes all the time because they keep on updating the design. So what you really need to do is do a stream and see what's popping up, or go to other streams and do a screen capture of what they're doing. And then what I do is I take that and I build, I go into Photoshop or into Affinity or whatever, and I build boxes of like, don't go here, don't go here, don't go here. And I make them an overlay with an alpha channel, like a ping file. And usually I make the overlays, I make them like 50% opaque, so that they're not covering up what I have. I can see what I'm putting under it. I just know that it's in a line, that it's out of whack. So it's either 25 or 50% opacity. So I can just see like, oh, I'm putting something over there, and I've got I do borders at 100% opacity, so that I can see where I'm accidentally, as I'm building the designs, what it's going to go under. I will tell you that, you saw a lot of the layouts in Twitch. If you're not doing games, I don't know if you're not doing like games, I'm not sure Twitch is a viable platform, to be honest. Like I just think that Twitch they've got the game thing down, but it has been kind of a failure of doing anything other than that. If you're doing games, then all for it. But just think about that. But as far as YouTube goes, the other nice thing about YouTube is in live streaming, there's not that much debris on it, at least in the main screens, but definitely on the phone you may see some. So, but that's what I would do is kind of, and I used to build one and then I'd use it all the time, and then a couple weeks later, stuff is under it again. So think about that. The other thing to think about is if you build a template, if you're building a thumbnail for your live stream, the other thing to remember is that there are timers and other things on YouTube. So when you build that, also think about the thumbnail. The thumbnail you need to have a guide to avoid the debris on the pre-show thumbnail as well. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Have we moved beyond title safe or action safe yet?
Oh yeah, I don't even think about title safe or action safe anymore.
Neither of those would apply in that.
That doesn't occur to me. Like doesn't even like I don't even think about it. Like I don't like it's I don't like it's because I don't do a lot that goes on TV, and even then generally most modern TVs show you every pixel. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
It's obvious we don't worry about title safe. I was when I was at my mom's house. By the way, she became quite a fan of the show. There was a lot. You couldn't see the whole image. There was words cut off on her TV in her bedroom. I think title safe is not to be thrown out. Hold on. Also, I would argue that a certain amount of either title or action safe just aesthetically looks better to me.
I think that if you do true title safe, it looks weird now. Like it's really far up. I think that's all I would say. And I think that also
I would move title to safe action.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I don't usually go right up against the bottom, but sometimes do. And I guess I also look at how many people are watching. I have a tendency to build content for what will 90% of the people do 90% of the time. And so if I think that you're in the 10%, I don't spend a lot of time figuring that out. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I don't think of it in terms of title or action safe anymore. I think about it in art terms, in terms of negative space, and making sure that there's some rest margin around anything I really want my people to look at. When you get into a circumstance with a really crowded screen like our panel grid, you can definitely break through the margins and you're not dangerous, but I still wouldn't make sure that my titles under a person's name get so close to the edge that there's not much area for their eye to settle on that first character and continue. That's just my feeling.
Next question.
Next one comes from Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, BC, Canada. I was watching the Colleen Henry episode yesterday and enjoyed the animated super sources. Was that MixEffect? I also noticed the colors look different than what comes out of the usual office hours episode. What was the video pipeline?
Yeah, good, Courtney.
Well, I'll let you comment on what you used for the production. I did notice something about the colors, which was strange. Maybe it was something Colleen's camera was doing that because of that pink outfit she was wearing. When she would move her hand up into the frame, the skin tones would change and the color tone would change. So maybe it was she just had it set on automatic white balance.
Yeah,
that been doing that. But
yeah, she's got a lot of color behind her, and I think it was she was just using an iPhone for that. That was an iPhone.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah,
here's what she looked like in her.
Yeah.
And the two up, and Alex can comment on what he used for doing all of his production.
The production was all in Mimolive, so all those animated bits and pieces were all done in Mimo. I could have done it, and to be honest, I want to figure out what it would look like to do it inside of an ATEM, just to kind of I'm using this as an opportunity to, like, as I build these shows, I want to learn how to build them in Mimo, in OBS, in vMix, in Vector, in, like on the ATEMs. I kind of want to, I'm using these kind of workshops for me, as kind of a Rosetta Stone. Like, I understand how the first thing I'm doing right now is Mimo's the fastest one for me to think about. Like, oh, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. It may not, Again, it may drop some frames here and there if I don't set up my computer correctly. It may do a bunch of other things, but I can play with ideas very, very fast in there. But I also want to figure out how to do it in a, I kind of want to, and then I'll go, well, and I'm trying to build what I would consider a complete show, inside of these. So I haven't done some things already. I haven't done the countdown clock and an open and a thing. And, I'm going to try to build a lot of these things out and then do them in all the different platforms so that I understand what the different platforms are better at, worse at, like that kind of thing. So you won't see it me dedicating myself to one thing, which I've been really kind of in the ATEM world for a long time. Still love it, still using it, still going to use it, using it in a big project next week. But I want to make sure that I understand the other ones and how they compare, because I think sometimes that's kind of when I'm talking to people about it, I can talk about my assumptions about what makes the ATEM better, and there's a lot of things that it does do better. But I also want to say, but this does this really well, and this does this really well, and I want to be a little bit more open-minded in that area. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, regarding the color, what I saw yesterday was the only way I can describe it is that it looked a little more punchy, just because I'm so used to your setup and what you look like here. I mean, this is what I saw yesterday.
I feel like
it's a little more contrasty.
What I will say is that
necessarily, it's just different.
I feel like it was overexposing me, and I don't know where it would do that. Like, I don't know why it would. I feel like I'm overexposed in it compared to what I am in this show. You can see it right here. I mean, this is the same input, and I felt like mine was brighter, but I don't have any. I don't have any color correction to do that. I don't have any color correction applied in Mimo to do that. And it's just a Mimo, like it's my ATEM going into my Mimo to do that thing. And so I don't know exactly. I have noticed that it's a brighter image. I don't know why. A brighter image and less saturated. Go ahead, Chris.
I remember what I was going to say the last question. It's kind of the same topic here. At one point I did see, and it could have very easily been me, I saw Colleen freeze. I don't know if that was on her end, in your computer, at my end. It's probably me. Mm-hmm. And also I was going to ask, did you, in the Mimo, do you set up those presets as buttons on your Stream Deck?
Not yet. I don't know how to do that yet.
It's very easy. Yeah. I figured it out. You ought to be able to figure it out.
I don't know. You're much smarter than I am.
That's not true.
So I don't. I just haven't. I have the layer sets. What I really want to do is get it on working on my phone. I think there's a way to make a device and so on and so forth.
That's bad because a glass surface, you can't touch it.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So I have plenty.
And I believe the way you do it. Is you can create a keyboard shortcut for each one, and then just map those keyboard shortcuts to it.
I tried that, and I was having trouble getting the keyboard shortcuts to work. So that was why I didn't. There's a couple of them already there, and I just couldn't get it to do what I wanted to do. So I was like, oh, okay, well. But I am, again, those are the kind of things that I'm going to start to improve on. Stream Deck is definitely on the list of things to work on for the next one. I probably won't use it in the Michael Krasny show later this morning, but I'll use it by next week in Michael Krasny's show. We'll be using a Stream Deck or some kind of hardware device to control the cuts. I do think that'll make a big difference. Go ahead, Mitchell.
What's your workflow with graphics? Do you use Alpha Channel or do you Lumi key them in Mimo?
In Mimo, I'm using Alpha Channels because I have them. Yeah, they're all there. So you just load them in. Whether it's that's what I went through and got Mukana to deliver now with Alpha Channel in HTML5. And so, yeah, I do all of that with, I do the Luma key in, you always want to use Alpha Channels if you have them, but the problem is that if you do Alpha Channels into a switcher, it doesn't work with an HDMI switcher if it's animated. And the reason for that is that if it's an animated lower third, it doesn't work because it is it won't stay in sync. The two. Now, for what I'm doing here, and the reason and then with the ATEM, I oftentimes, if I just have little lower thirds to throw in, I throw those into the buffer, right? I just throw them into buffers with Alpha Channels, pings, or TGAs with Alpha Channels. The problem is it was live input, and so I wanted to deliver it. And I could deliver that to the ATEM and Luma key it, or in this case, I could deliver this if I figure out a key fill output from a web page, which I think I can do. I could deliver this with an Alpha Channel because it's not moving. Like I may be moving it in and out, but it's a static image.
So a
there's-
moving image, you'd use ProRes 444.
If I was cutting it to video, yeah. I mean, the real challenge isn't when you're doing questions and stuff like that. You use ProRes to do that typically with a hyperdeck or something. But again, you need SDI at that point. So you need to have an SDI output, the HDMI will not stay in sync. So you have to have, and then you use like the hyperdeck minis or other things like that. So anyway, there's a bunch of, again, these are the vagaries that we're trying to kind of work out. And again, some of these are going to be worked out on these computers. Other ones are going to be worked out in the cloud. I want to put vMix in the, in a cloud. Also Vector, is something I'm really interested in as far as, building those. We had the folks from Viz on a couple months ago, and I'm super excited about it. So we're going to keep on trying to figure out how to do it in lots and lots of different ways over the next couple months. So you'll see a lot of different experimentation. So lots to talk about. Next question.
Ronnie Hofsoy in Tromsø, Norway says, sometimes we have a presenter showing a PowerPoint or keynote on a big screen TV to the side, often with an all-white background. We can edit the slides or adjust the TV image, which is difficult to get right. How else can we mitigate this? Use a LUT, ND filter, or what?
Go ahead, Bill.
In the past, when I've done this, it was usually back in the old days when we didn't have a lot of the more complex LCD and LED and OLED screens in the background. So it depends a little bit on what kind of a screen. What we used to do is actually cut NDs for the background TV, and sometimes an ND with CTO or color temperature orange to take the very bright, high color temperature of that screen, mostly in those days a CRT, and bring it down mostly to the kind of lighting we were using. Now, we were using tungsten back in those days, and so you have much more option in terms of the light on your main presenter, but using those kind of tools to get the balance correct from a active light-emitting monitor and the light you have on the presenter is your challenge, and that's just one of the tools I used to use successfully to get that done.
I mean, you can definitely try to adjust it with building a custom ICC file, for your output, for the computer output to do that. It is going to be challenging because it may affect everything, So the best way to approach this is really through a template file. So you want to give your speakers a template file at the very beginning, like, hey, you're speaking here. We'd really like to use this template to try to keep them all looking the same. The more complicated you make the template and the more weird you make the template, the less likely they're going to use it. I can tell you as a speaker, if you send me one with a bunch of weird little swishes and all kinds of other stuff in it, the chances of me using it are very low. Like I will be just like, yeah, thanks. And unless you review it and force me into that, I am not going to use it. If you use something very basic and it just kind of gives everything the same color and everything else, then I'm much more likely to use it as a speaker because you're just making my job easier. Like if you look at the WWDC ones, for instance, I was given a format for that when I spoke there, and super simple and much better looking than anything I had done. And so I was like, oh, that's easy. So you want to make sure that speakers are walking in going, this is way better than what I was going to do, not this is worse. I know I have been slowly moving away from white. I used to use white a lot for presentations because people would print them. And if you do a dark presentation and people decide, oh, I want to print it, the pages come out wet. Like they literally, there's so much ink in them, they come out and they're wrinkly. When you're printing those color ones out. So I made them white so that they would use up the least amount of ink. Like that's literally why I switched to white. Everything was black and it had big designs on the back end and everything else. And so for a decade, I just went to white because I would watch people print them, and it was like, oh, this prints really nicely, and nothing's muddy and doesn't use up an entire cartridge to print out 40 slides. Now that almost nobody is printing the slides anymore, I'm going back to dark gray for most of the stuff that I'm doing. So you'll see that. But it took me a little while to then get back out of the habit because I was used to having all my graphics playing over a white background so I could key it really quickly. So now I have to build new skills. Next question.
CJ Cavell in Downingtown, Pennsylvania. What's the best workflow to take an architectural model built with SketchUp and convert to USDZ for the Vision Pro? I think it's Reality Converter, just not sure of the 3D file format and settings to tweak on export from SketchUp.
I'll go with Jason.
Oh, I've got great news for you, CJ. You don't even have to do that. I mean, directly from SketchUp, you can go out to USDZ. which is a universal scene descriptor zipped. And it's been part of SketchUp since not the very beginning, but at least since they had the iPad app.
Yeah. And so, yeah, you can do it. You should be able to do it directly out of USDZ. You can also export an OBJ, and OBJ can go into Reality Converter, and that will then convert it to USDZ. Another way, if you really want to, push the textures and so on and so forth, Adobe Substance will also go USDZ, but you can also reapply a bunch of textures and make it look really pretty. The main thing you want to make sure is that you're getting the UVs out from, so OBJ should carry those UVs, but you do have to define them. Sometimes you have to add textures to a model before you can define the UVs. When I'm exporting out of Cinema 4D and then going through Substance to put textures on, I have to go through the process in Cinema 4D of defining the UVs for every surface. Substance won't do that for you. So you'll need to, and then that's going to define how the textures are mapped. Next question.
Kyle Hammond in Chicago is up next. Alex, you mentioned last night was the first workshop fireside chat, which implies more to come. Can you share what other workshops are planned for the future?
We're still working that out. I mean, I think that it is I want to start doing things that are, the workshops and fireside chats are, I think going to be interesting. One of the things I want to do is do them in the evening. So we're serving other parts of our audience that aren't able to get to us, especially for those of you in Australia, but for many folks that, this is an inconvenient time, whether it's just they have work days or whatever. I want to make sure that we're serving that other side of the pond. So that's part of it. Also, we're trying to figure out how to do these in a lighter way, and also just a different format. Just play with it, and it also lets us test all these edit systems that will inform what we do with office hours over time. What I'm a little bit concerned about is like, hey, let's use an entire software puzzle that we've never used before, and then try to run office hours in it. That makes me concerned. So the idea is, hey, let's do this in a whole bunch of different formats, figure this all out, get used to it all, and then figure out how we add the magic sauce that we normally use for office hours and make it work. I don't ever expect them to be the same as office hours. My goal is to limit it to up to 6 people, so kind of a more normal show. Still using Mukana, obviously. That's what we used yesterday. So we're still using a bunch of the pieces of what we do here, but it's also designed to be a bit lighter. So that we can kind of figure those things out. And I would ask another question, but the questions aren't in the right order right now. Only the folks in the back end. You can't do that. Yeah. So anyway, next question.
The next question is from Philip Oler in Katana, New York. Hi, I need to scale an SD TV spot to 1080 by 1920. Looking for recommendations. The best approach to achieving the best results. The destination is TikTok.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
If I do something to 1080 and scaling, I'm a lot of times doing it in After Effects. I use Boris, Red Giant, and I'm experimenting with Topaz.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, whatever you do is just scale the 640 by 480, which is probably the original resolution of that old TV spot, SD TV spot, so that the 640 is 1080. So it'll fill the frame left to right in your 1080 by 1920. And then on the bottom of the screen, you can maybe put a graphic in or something that tells about the spot that you're showing to fill up the rest of that thing. And I would put the 1080 by 640 now, or screen, or 1080 by whatever the width 640 scaled up. The height is. Make sure that you include both the left and right edges. You could do a center cut out of it, but then you're going to lose stuff if you're trying to show a TV spot. You don't want to edit it and edit stuff out of the left and right because it might have graphics that are going to run off the screen, et cetera. So I'd just change the width to match that of the 1080.
Go ahead, Chris.
Philip, the file may not be 640 by 480. If it is a file, it could be 720 by 480 or 486. If so, those are non-square pixels. Make sure you adjust for that.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be continuing. We have lots of questions still here for a Friday. So we'll be continuing those in the second hour. Just a quick reminder, of course, that we have our new volunteer meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. That is going to come roughly after. Saturdays and even any day that we do Q&A lasts as long as we have questions. So sometimes Saturday is 2 hours, sometimes it's an hour and a half. But at 9 o'clock a.m. Pacific Standard Time, we'll do the new volunteer meeting. And so if you're interested in being a volunteer, you'll see a posting, especially for the new one. I'll post this at everyone in Discord, so you can do that there. But if you're interested in seeing what we're doing and getting an introduction of how this all works, this is a great meeting for us to do that in. So keep your eye out for it. But 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time tomorrow, we'll have that new volunteer meeting. Now let's go ahead and jump into the second hour. And we're back. And normally we would talk about something else, but we're not. We're just going to keep on answering questions because that's what we do. Let's go ahead and jump into the next question.
We start with Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. I am looking at experimenting with ZoomISO and possibly purchasing a license. Does this need to be run on a Mac with Apple Silicon?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, there is no Windows version of ZoomISO, so you do need a Mac with an Apple M1 processor or anything newer than that. There are other products on the market that will integrate with Zoom as well. Anything's better than screen scraping. Mimolive has direct integration with Zoom as well. I believe Ecamm now and Cinemaker also has that. So there are a bunch of options on the market. I think Wirecast, I don't know if it's still in beta, but they did add that.
I think vMix is also working on it. There's a longer list. I think if you go to the Liminal site, you'll see the list of the different pieces of software that can grab onto those. But if you're looking for a ZoomISO specifically, you need an M1 to do that. And so, I don't think that there's any Intel version of that. It may, I'm not 100% sure of that, but I'm pretty sure. But I would get an M1 for that to make that happen. Next question.
Greg Greckmeyer in Topping, Virginia is up next. With so many USB-C cables gathering on my workbench, has anyone found a USB-C tester that measures data transfer and power capabilities?
Go ahead, Jason.
There are some out there, and they cost a fortune. Your best bet is to get a very big file that is of a known size and run an A/B test.
Yeah, I don't know if there's ones that will, the speed is a big deal. I don't find that many that can't handle the power. So generally the USB-Cs will handle the power that's going through them, but it is the speed at which it can transfer. And I agree with Jason. Typically what I've done is I go to a drive that's that's capable of 2 gigs a second or whatever, and I plug it in and run a disk speed test with Blackmagic to see what the cable will provide. And some of them, the reason that it's really important is that some of them will provide like 30 megs a second or 10 megs a second, like they're super slow. So you have to, which is funny because at 30 megs a second, we used to have to wipe our drives every week to get that speed on our hard drives when we had a Media 100. Now go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, as you could see, I just moved my location back to my work desk here, and I find myself doing a lot of this. This looks like it's going to be a good one. Yeah, I'll use this. Like it really would be. It would be great if there was a thing where you could just go boop boop and say power works, data transfer, or video. Like it's super frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, the new ones that I buy, the ones that I bought are generally 3.2s, and so I know that they're all going to be. I just look for that. I look for generation 3.2 when I buy them.
So you bought them, and then they're going to go in a drawer, or you're going to move them someplace.
They say 3.2 on them, and they're also. I buy all of every cable I buy is braided. So I never buy rubber cable, anything with plastic or rubber on them. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is they coil nicer. So they just rub against each other nicer. It's easier to coil them, especially the metal ones. And then the other thing is that I always know they're mine because no one else does that. And the third thing is I always know that almost no one sends me braided cables with their product unless it's like sound devices. And so I know that they're the ones I bought. And so those are some of the reasons that I kind of tend to stick with braided cables. They are nicer. Right? Now I'm ruining everything because I've told everyone to buy braided cables. Now everyone's going to have braided cables. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, well, I've got a braided cable right here that won't pass video. So there.
That's not good. Oh, there you go. Well, no,
They're
but I
not
buy them.
necessarily all.
It's not that it's braided. It's not the braiding doesn't make it better. It's that I buy them and I know that I bought them looking for a 3.2, and then I bought those there. I mean, the hardest thing for me is keeping track of all my Thunderbolt cables because the Thunderbolts are not the same as the USB-C, and that fortunately all Thunderbolt cables are marked correctly. So you open them up and they say Thunderbolt 4, Thunderbolt 3. The standard has something that's put on every cable, which makes it nicer. The best cables generally will put a standard on the end. So if you're buying a 3.2 or a really fast one, a lot of times they want to brag, and so they print it right at the connector, and so you do tend to know that you've got a fast one. Next question.
Kyle Hammond in Chicago is up next. You said you pulled Colleen's image using Syphon. Is there a reason to not join a meeting from Mimo?
I haven't done it often enough. so it's there. I found myself going, well, what do I create the meeting in? And the reality is, last night it probably would have been easier. I was having some other issues. It probably would have been easier for me to do it from Mimo out of a meeting. And so I am gonna. My goal is to move over to Mimo, and Oliver's approved it. I mean, I got the thing all set up for it. And I just hadn't done it enough that I was confident that I could pull off the show. And so that's why I did that way. But hopefully by next week, I'll be pulling everything in directly into Mimo, which will be one less app running on the system. Next question.
Ian Alford in London is up next. In the stream last night, you used the monochrome office hours logo. This show has the tricolour version. What determines your decision around which version to use?
Because the folks haven't updated to the mono. so I posted it for folks to use. I was like, here it is. And it hasn't been updated yet. So you'll see it all move to mono, or then eventually move it to some other renderings. But the 3-color version should go away. It's still bouncing around in different places right now, but it should go to the mono. Next question.
Nate Smith in Grand Rapids, Michigan's up next. I've found that some HDMI to SDI converters degrade the video quality going through it. I thought both of these signal types were uncompressed. Is there a way to know if an SDI converter is pure from input to output?
Go, Jason.
Well, one way is to take one that you know is pure and run scopes on it, and then one that you're worried about and see if it's messed up or not. This is some footage that, let's see, I'm not sure if I have these scopes set correctly. No, that's conforming to Rec 709, so never mind. But basically, if you set your scopes to what, 12-bit, you should be able to tell visually pretty quickly.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, and this is where quality costs. It pays for quality converters. Or Barco shop at the office, or decimators, and not some of the Chinese knockoff jams.
Yeah. And I think the Blackmagic ones are pretty good as far as SDI to HDMI converters. I mean, those aren't too expensive to make that actually work. But yeah, as soon as you start buying ones that are $49 and they have other advantages, HDMI to SDI it'll do the HDCP handshake and then hand it off to SDI, which is useful. The more expensive ones tend to be more sensitive about that because they don't want to get into trouble, but the Chinese ones don't care. So there are other advantages to it, but the disadvantages is that they may not do the color correctly. Next question.
Chester Sweeney's up next. The question is Millenium cameras to film Tucson, and it says they're 3024. I think that might be a typo.
It's not.
I don't
it's
think
not.
They're going.
I looked at the
30?
article. Yeah.
Really? Interesting. So 1,000 years? Right. Okay. This was 100. On the news.
Oh, maybe is it 1,000 years?
It's 1,000 years.
Yeah, exactly. So so this guy basically built a camera that is almost completely opaque. Like it's barely letting any light in, and the idea is to do a very, very long exposure. I saw it there, and I agree with Chester that the chances of it surviving more than a year are very low. It's a camera on a pole.
Anyway.
In the desert. I just don't think people are going to protect it for 1,000 years. So anyway, I think that we'll see how that goes. Next question.
Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, BC, Canada. Is there a way in DaVinci Resolve to display a project length in minutes and not just time code? Sometimes I'm asked to locate a segment at a specific moment in time, and the time code makes it hard because it's time of day.
I don't know. You know, the funny thing is that I am so focused on time code that I realized when I read that when the question was read, I was like, I've never thought of that. I've never thought I needed to do that. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so the reason why is 'cause sometimes my client will be like, I was just watching the episode back and I want to make a clip for social media and it's right at the 35-minute mark and all I see is time going on. I don't know where 35 minutes is in this.
What I will say is that what I do in that case is when I send clients something to review, I burn in time code. Like I burn the time code in to there's every editing app has a way to burn time code in. So I just burn the time code into the bottom, and then they just tell me it's at this number. It's they don't have to look at the time on where they were in it. They look at the number, just say, just give me the number there. The other thing that you can do is if you tie it into something like frame.io and they put the note in, it comes in as a marker, so you know exactly where it belongs. Go ahead, Bill.
So once upon a time, I had to do a time code complex calculation, and I decided, foolishly as it turned out, that I would try to do the math in base 60 and build this little thing in a thing I had called Megaform. It was the most interesting week I spent, and I finally got it, but it was really annoying. I agree. I would put that in my NLE and let the NLE do the calculations. They do time code. The base math they do for it is actually really interesting and very different, but working in base 60 can be difficult, and translating that is not as trivial as you'd think it is unless you have an automated system that's built for that.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, you might look. I'm not sure about DaVinci Resolve because I haven't used it. A lot of them will have, you can set the time code to be either the built-in time code, reading the time code of as in when it was shot, and you can also get run length time code, which is the beginning of that shot to that point. So, or the beginning of the video to that point. And then if you get run length time code that is not the production time code, it will tell you 00 hours, 35 minutes, etc. So I don't know if does DaVinci have that the ability to do just run length of your particular show?
Yeah, I'm not sure. The other thing that we've done, I know in Final Cut, is we use a lot of times we use smart slates, whether it's a smart slate on a iPad, or a Denicky or something like that, and we put it up there. That time code there, you can go into a layer or a video in the time frame and say, this is the time code right here. Like you can set your marker on that frame and just reset the time code, and it'll just reset it both directions based on the time code you give it for that one thing. So you could set them all at the very beginning at, again, set the time code at 00000 or 1000000, and it would then be the time for the rest of it. So you could reset all of those as well. Go ahead, Chris.
Alexander, I'd recommend what Alex said about burning in the time code. You could make a file that is just minutes and seconds that you could slap on top of your timeline and key it and kick that out. That sounds ridiculous, even saying it out loud.
I was about to say, that's the most ridiculous idea I've ever heard.
Right?
But anyway.
So I had to say it, and now I'm retracting it. Alexander, do not make a file that has minutes and seconds and key it over the top. Burn in the time code. And what I would do is I'd say, give me the ins and outs of what you want to do, and give me the first words and last words. Because sometimes people get sloppy. They go, oh, and then they write it down, and it's too late or whatever. Ask for first words, last words. It makes it much more simple. I mean, that's all I do is pull things out of long files for people.
Good, Bill.
I don't use Resolve, but in Final Cut, you actually can put a generator that generates time code up on the top. Make it small and bingo.
Every
right
app
there
has a time code generator, guaranteed. Yeah, go ahead.
Right.
Because this is what we all use it for. Go ahead, Alex.
Right. Yeah, so Mickey was saying that in the chat, once material is synced up, set the timeline starting time code so that FFOA starts at the 1 hour mark. Once that is set, the playhead position will reflect the same or close to the same position in the video length.
There you go. Next question.
Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware. I lost my Aphex channel mic processor during the power outage. Where could I get it repaired or replaced?
Go ahead, Alex.
I would definitely get it repaired. I've repaired quite a few of these types of analog products. They're not that hard, and oftentimes the first thing to go is the power supply. I used to own a Aphex channel, Mitch, and there's not that many capacitors in the power supply section. That's a real trivial thing for anybody to fix with an hour's worth of time, and it's probably not going to cost you more than it should be less than $200 to repair that, 2 hours at the most. And I just Googled electronics repair where you are, and there's a bunch in your town that work on sound equipment. So I would definitely get it fixed.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, as far as who repairs Aphex, I don't know who took them over, who they sold their engineering data to, but Coast Recording in LA on Santa Monica used to be an Aphex rep, and I think they did a lot of electronics repair, and they sell used equipment, so they might be able to repair it for you if they're still around. They may have shut down during the pandemic. I'm not sure. Coast Recording in Los Angeles.
As someone who used to own and use an Aphex for about a couple years, do you need it? That's all I'd ask. Like, do you really need to fix it? I don't know.
Just say
I don't
no.
know if you need to. Just I don't know if you need it. I used to own one. Next question.
Roscoe Jones is in for Madison, Indiana. Following a speaker, take 2, do you prefer the look of using a camera with a long lens in the back of the room to the look of using a small pan tilt zoom up front with a wide angle lens? And do you always want to shoot from the talent's eye level?
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, most people do rule of thirds, and they try to put the eye line somewhere on that top third. That's a kind of a traditional framing, as to which they will look very different. In fact, there's some really cool videos on YouTube about the difference between a zoom-in shot from far away and a wider shot from up close, and it changes the geometry of many things in the screen. And so it's an aesthetic difference you should learn and then decide which look you want. People's faces will look different in those two circumstances, and the look you prefer is something you should understand for yourself.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things in between too. So the main reason we end up putting cameras in the back typically is because we have an audience there, and you don't want to put the camera. What happens is when you think about a stage here, and you drop your camera, let's say you put your camera here, you now have to you have seat kills. So these seat kills are all going to be back here. So where people feel and how aggressive people get about seat kills depends on whether they really want to make sure that everybody can see the whole stage. And so once you put something up there, a PTZ can help. But the reason that we tend to move them back is because of that. Now, a lot of times what we've kind of moved towards is if we think about the stage, we'll back it up a little bit more here. The stage here, I really like Super 35 sensors, but you can't run a Super 35 sensor more than 75 feet. Partially because there's not many lenses for it. And the other part is that your depth of field gets so small, you're so short that you get the nose in focus and the eyes are out of focus. It's like really, really tiny. And so I really like the look of it though. So a lot of times what we do is at 75 feet, that's where I tend to build the camera rig. And I usually put mine up front like that, put all the press out here like this so they have to fend for themselves. And so our camera is here at 75 feet. And it goes over one. This means that there's a giant seat kill in the back. There's a big platform there. And so basically what it means is that all the seats go like this, and there's nothing behind it. Or the other option is that we can drop an iMag right here. So right over top of where our cameras are, we can put a big screen there, and you'll see that. And so that's your delay screen. And then you can keep on putting people behind you. So but you don't do it like a little camera. You do it like all the cameras, and then put a screen up there. And then if you're in that area, you're going to watch the screen. The reality is almost everybody's watching the screen after the first 30 rows. Like almost everybody's looking up. And even now I'm being cautious. It's really more like the first 10 rows, and everyone starts looking at the screen, looking at the iMag. I will say the iMag feels very uncomfortable if you're looking up. It's a very odd look. But it's usually shoulder height. So most cameras live at shoulder height. It makes everybody look a little taller. So shoulder height is usually what we're thinking about, but a lot of times we're lining that up. Typically this platform in the back here is 36 inches high. I mean, we usually just that's kind of the standard. And that usually does end up being a little bit at that distance, a little higher than the stage. And that usually works out okay. It's almost straight on in that area, but we can make the this base, and we can lower the tripod and everything else to get it there. But we usually try to end up with the lens sitting, right at the, Adam's apple or whatever. That's in a perfect world. But of course, you've got lots of different speakers with different heights. You can't fix it for everybody. So that's what you kind of think about there. And then oftentimes for us, we have, we have two PTZs up front like this, and those are the returns. Those are getting anybody who's going to stand up, people reacting, everything else. We love using PTZs in the front because camera operators are distracting. If they start looking at something, they look at their phone, they're talking, they're fiddling with their camera, that's a distraction from the audience, for the audience that are looking at the stage. And as a result, we almost never want to put a camera operator in the front, in that area. And so then we usually have, we usually put cameras on the wings like this when we have the budget, so that you can get when they're looking this way or looking that way, you can grab onto them. And then finally, in this one, again, this will typically be one lock off with one wide. And then we usually have high and wides. Oops, I just deleted it. High and wides on either area. Little cameras. They're usually like the little micros with wide angle lenses. They're a nice little shot. Get to see the whole thing. Give people a little bit of a thing. But that's our kind of standard camera package for a larger event. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
No, I think I was already in. So,
sorry. Next question.
Chris Fenwick is up next from Half Moon Bay, California. Have we discussed a location to cover the eclipse, or has all the prep talk been about what lens and ND to shoot an eclipse with?
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I'm just curious. In the eclipse talk, has there been some locations
yes.
called out? Can you
5.
share?
I think 5 or 6 of them. So I think that Josh has someone and he's talking to in Mexico. We have a couple locations in Eastern Texas that we're looking at right now. I'm probably going to go to Texas, mostly because it has the least chance of cloud cover. But we're also looking at, I believe, Illinois, Arkansas, Ohio, and Canada. And I'm probably missing a couple there, but along it. So in the coverage that we're working on right now, we've been meeting every week about it. In the coverage that we're looking at right now, our goal is to be able to cut to an eclipse about every 6 to 12 minutes, through the whole thing. So it's a 2-hour event. 30 minutes at the beginning will be kind of what is an eclipse and why do we think it's important and what's unique. An interesting thing, which I don't have the answer for yet, but I've been kind of asking folks, and no one seems to have this answer. So I'm going to probably end up doing some harder math. I'm sure it's somewhere, and I just haven't Googled enough. But someone will Google it right now and tell me, I'm sure. But I believe that the only planet in this solar system that has a total eclipse is the Earth. So I believe
that's true, and I think that's why the aliens come here.
Right,
to see eclipses.
They come eclipse viewing, alien eclipse viewing. Yeah. But I think that literally, so the fascinating, just to go because we have time here. If you think about it, the Earth is in one place, the moon is in this place, and the sun is way out here, right? Like this giant sun. Yeah. The amazingness of a total eclipse is the fact that you have a moon that's very tiny compared to everything else and a sun that's giant, and they just happen to be at the right distance from the Earth so that the moon completely obscures the sun. And it's only going to happen for a couple million years. So it started happening a little while ago, and in a couple million years, it's going to stop happening because the moon is changing its position to the Earth over, inches a year or whatever, or an inch a year. I don't know what the number is, but it's something. So that at some point, people.
That's why the aliens started in 1947.
Exactly. So anyway, but it is an amazing thing that only happens on our planet in the solar system because of the distances of all the things that are required. Now, you may have other eclipses where the moon is much bigger than the sun. The sun just disappears behind it. That's a total eclipse. But the fact that the moon sits right over top of the sun and you can see the edges of the sun it only happens on Earth, which is just a fascinating. I find it to be.
We don't really know. We don't really know if it happens because you'd almost have to go there. But lecture I always.
You do the math.
That's theoretical math on theoretical sizes.
That's a pretty known theoretical math.
Definition of not theoretical.
Like we're talking about
this drawing was not.
This is on known paths. I think we can figure that one out.
Okay, but Sure, Mr. Science. You know, the thing I always tell people.
The thing is, I don't think it's close. I don't think any of them are close. It's not like
without the sun. This is why I always tell people.
We'd all die. Without the
sun, everything dies. Without the moon, everything in the ocean dies. Okay, because we lose our currents. We lose. Yeah. The ocean becomes a stagnant cesspool, and the fact that they all line up, to me, it's just God showing off.
It's
like, hey, look what I can do every couple of years.
Next question.
I'm going to go to East Texas. If you want to ride, I'm going to drive.
Okay. Well, I'm thinking
if you need to send some gear, I could take some gear probably.
I may drive too because I'm not sure if I'll be able to get a hotel. So I'm leaning towards a
camper experience.
Camper experience. Yeah. So I might take my family too. It's the only one that we had. We're spoiled because we had one only 6 years ago. So we think, these happen all the time. It's not happening again for like 20 years, like in the United States. Like it is.
And this is probably the best one of the century.
4 minutes. Like it's a long, like the last one we had, we were really stressed out because it was 2.5 minutes. It's if you are in the United States or you have the ability, this is worth going to. This is a long, like 4.5 minutes of totality is a eternity when it comes to eclipses. So it's really going to be interesting. And so we're going to do the best we can to cover it as best we can. The hard part with eclipses, they happen so few times that no one's very good at it. Like everyone's like, well, we do this, and no one has a budget. No one has like I had a budget on the last one, so I had Nat Geo budget, so we covered it relatively well. But even then, we were like, if I did this a couple more times, I'd get really good at it.
How early are you going to show up, Alex? If it's on the 8th,
I'll probably be there by the 5th or 6th, something like that.
Okay.
Get your Winnebago reservations in early, folks.
Yeah, exactly. Next question.
Ryan Raderman in Chicago, Illinois. I need to mount or set my teleprompter on my desk as I don't have space for a tripod behind the desk. I want the base of the prompter to sit just 8 inches above my desk. Do you have a recommendation for the best way to do this?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, it depends. It depends on the weight of your teleprompter. It depends on whether you're going to have a camera attached to that teleprompter hanging out the back cantilevered. One possible solution is something like this is a laptop stand, which you can get. This one's adjustable, I think, up to 18 inches tall and down to flat to just 2 inches. So it's adjustable in height and angle so that you could just lay the monitor, the back of the monitor of your teleprompter on top of that flat plate. You may be able to drill a hole in that flat plate and put a 1/4-20 screw into it to keep it from sliding around or falling off, and then raise it and lower it to your desired height, and it would accommodate what you're needing to do. However, you can't hang too much weight off the back of it unless you're going to anchor it to the desk in some fashion.
David?
Yeah, to Courtney's point too about the size and weight of prompter, I'm using a little 7-inch thing, Z-Cam behind it, and it's an ARM, I think it's the Elgato Flex system that I'm using, which does it. It's on the desk, so it does shake when I shake the desk. I'm not in an earthquake zone, so but it works for me. 8 inches off the deck is a little low, so you'd be looking that way rather than that way, but
unless the desk's a little higher. Yeah, that might be the case. The other thing to look at is it depends on what the rest of your room looks like. I know you don't have a lot of room, but one of the things we've sent out to make that work is there's a company called Triad Orbit, and Triad Orbit makes a bunch of really great stands, and one of them, I think I actually have one right behind me. It has a flat opening to it, and then it's just a pole that goes up. And I've used it for these kinds of things all the time. So it's got flat. So it sits very flat at the bottom. We can usually get the table within 6 inches of the other side. And usually, even though you don't have a lot of room, you may have enough room for that because you still have a teleprompter back there, and you have a lot of other things. You may not have enough room for a tripod, but if you've got 6 inches from the table to the wall, which I don't build anything with less than 6 inches. I build all my tables so that I can get behind them. So you can always tell someone in production who does a lot of production is they always build at least 24 inches behind their table so that they can always get to it because no one wants to crawl under it again. So anyway, but if you really don't have that space, then you have to look at a couple things. You can also think about I think that MakerPipe would probably not be quite strong enough, but you can speed rail it or use 80-20. So 80-20 comes in a lot of different things, and a lot of times when we're putting things against walls and we need structure to it, you can get some pretty large 80-20 or speed rail to run across there and then attach it to that. And you can put a lot of other things in there as well. So that, and speed rail is not, it's the connectors in speed rail that get you. It's not the speed rail itself is pretty cheap. The connectors are a little bit more expensive. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I'm going to try to do this, and I've got to cross arms here and punch this up and see if you can see it. But what I've done, I've got a 2-tiered desk, but you could also do this with something else, and used a combination of a C-clamp or a Mayfer clamp and a couple of basic grip gear things to literally put my teleprompter mount attached to the edge of the desk. I think that's one way to do that. Let me switch back out of this so that I don't show something I'm not supposed to show on the show. Whoops. And anyway, hopefully this is grip gear time for me. You need to get it at exactly the right level. And I know the camera behind here, I had to order 3 tiny tripods to see if I could get one that was exactly the right height to make all this geometry work. It takes some fiddling, but you can get there.
Next question.
Next question comes from Funsak Dorji in Dharamshala, India. Hi, panelists. Can you suggest a solution to pull off a virtual line on the screen for doing video referral for offsides during a soccer match? Thanks.
Yeah, that's not trivial. So here's what you need to think about in that area is you wouldn't be able to do it. You wouldn't be able to do it from moving cameras. You could do it from a virtual. If you want to do a virtual one, what you need to do is you need to do a lock off. So you do a lock off, and then you're going to have, typically you're going to have a fall off like this. And so you're going to have the fall off of that plane. And what you would end up doing is having a camera locked off. You can have a couple of different cameras locked off if you want. Obviously, you can move the cameras around, and you can do incredible things nowadays in the NFL, National Football League or in other things. But those systems are they're not trivial or inexpensive. There's a lot of calibration that's required before the game, and a lot of other bits and pieces. But in this case, you can have this set up as a lock off if you're actually using it for referral. And then what you need to do is you need to get it's just corner pinning a plane, a 3D plane, into that area. And so you need some kind of graphics system that's going to do that. And on that graphics, it would be taking that plane, and typically you're not going to corner pin it as much as you are going to. You could corner pin it actually, but you can take it and rotate it down into a 3D space. So you're going to rotate that plane and match it, but you got to match the fall off perfectly in that 3D space to get that working. So you take depending on, I would probably first approach this as an Unreal Engine problem. But if you are, I believe, and you have to test this, but if you are just corner pinning it, if you just did an image that was square and it had the lines on it and you corner pin these in, I bet you they'd be pretty darn close. Because they're gonna pin the same way that they did there. And I would try that first. It may not be perfect, so you might have to look at that. But you may find that those line up perfectly if you're just corner pinning them into the scene, because it's going to bend these correctly to make that actually work. You can't move the camera, and the camera shakes, and so will offsides. But you may do it. Otherwise, you need a 3D plane that you're going to move down and render out. And there's a lot of Unreal will run on, again, you're not trying to ask Unreal to do 100 frames a second. It just needs to sit there. So, you can find a 3D object, but you have to do a 3D object. And the big thing is that if you're doing a true 3D object and you're going to rotate it down, you need control over focal length and stuff like that as well. So those are things to think about. You also have to take into account things like the distortion of the lens and stuff like that if you're trying to be precise. I would say that for what you're talking about, we're probably worried less about that, just because where distortion really becomes a big deal in these areas is when you're moving and you're trying to make sure that every pixel sticks. But I would not, on a budget, I would not try to do something more than just a fixed shot that captures the entire field that has those lines. And I guess the only question I would have is, if you had that shot, those lines, a lot of those things are kind of on the field. So I'm not sure what you need those for. So you'll have to maybe give us more information if I'm not answering the question that you asked. Next question.
Tim Snyder in Louisville, Kentucky is up next. Can Alex do a quick overview of his remote system he sends to clients for remote interviews?
It depends. It depends on the budget. It depends on time. It depends on what we have. The most basic ones that we send out are we usually try to solve mics. So the most basic one that I just developed, I was just consulting for someone else and suggesting what they get there is there is I actually have it still in a box here because I haven't really had time to really dig into it, but it's a ring light it's like a $50 thing. It's a ring light with a holder for their iPhone, and they can just put it in there, and that's at least going to solve the iPhone problem and put the light in the right place. The second thing we want to do is manage your, and sometimes that's enough, for what you're doing. The big thing is that getting Ethernet into the camera makes a big difference or Ethernet into a phone or a computer. So figuring out how we solve that, and then a lot of the stuff we do for Michael Krasny for remotes, we just send out a mic. So we're really worried about a mic and in-ears. So we send them something they can put in their ears, and we send out a mic so that they can, and by the way, the in-ear with an extension cord, because the in-ears the cable's never long enough. So an extension cord with an in-ear, as well as and we are using the audio implements version of that. That's the standard broadcast one. The audio quality is not super high. It can be a little bit soft, but it's really easy to clean. It's or just give people new tips more than a consumer one. So we use those, but then we're still sending out the MV7. You saw all these mics that I'm testing because I'm trying to figure out whether the MV7 is still the right one, because it's it's expensive and it's got a thing. So we're still fiddling with that as far as what we end up using, but we've been still happy with the MV7 to make that actually work. I mean, those are the big things. Now, we have larger kits we're sending out MacMinis. We're sending out extra monitors for that return. Sometimes we're sending out teleprompters with a whole kit that has a MacMini and a MixPre and a switcher and a 6K Blackmagic 6K. So there's a lot of, and those are $15,000 kits that we send out. We did a lot more of that during COVID because you had no other choice to get high quality video. And so it just depends, but it just depends on what the client's budget is and what time frame they give it to us in. Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, the question is perfect timing for me because I've been thinking about remote kits too. The biggest impediment for me is just how expensive it is to ship stuff. Are you using a drop shipper? Or do you know of a company where you can just send all these kits to and say, you store it here and you just ship it, you do the distribution?
FedEx. We're using FedEx. I mean, we have a budget. And so even for Michael Krasny, I think almost all the subscription budgets just go to shipping mics. There's subscriptions for the Michael Krasny show for Gray Matter. And I think almost all of it's just there to support almost all the money. Actually more than all the money that it comes in subscription is spent just getting mics to the people. And it feels like overkill, except for the fact that it's so nice to listen to someone with a good mic. When we don't send them out, or they say, "Oh, I can use my own mic," or "I do this all the time." These are the things. Like I do podcasts all the time, and then we go look at their podcast or we go look at their interviews, and we're like, "Ooh, yeah, we're going to send you a mic." And the hard part is that I really feel like also at least for Michael Krasny's show, is that we've kind of created some trust with the listener that we're going to at least put the effort into it. And I think that between sending a mic out, Jeff Cohen does the post and he does a great job. And we put that extra work in, and I feel like they know that. I don't know if they care, but I do. I care that it sounds good. So I think that we do the best we can. You can't do it always because, again, you have folks on the remote end. Unfortunately, broadcasters have allowed people to be broadcasters have told interviewees that what's fine is not fine. What's not fine is fine. So they have the broadcasters just want to get the hit. It's 8 minutes. It's 8 minutes long. It doesn't matter to them. This is disposable content. Yeah. You're good enough. Let's get you on the air. And the problem with that is that now they go, well, I do this all the time. And when they hear, you'd be surprised at how many people will hear themselves on these mics or see our podcast or listen to our podcast and ping us back and go, so what was that mic? And how can I buy one? Because they realize how bad they've been sounding for so long. Next question.
Rian Smith in Trinidad, the West Indies, says, "Hi, heard you guys speaking of mapping keystrokes to the Stream Deck. I'd like a way to have mine within my ATEM mini PC rack to trigger keystrokes for the mini PC to shut down by itself or trigger something."
Go ahead, David.
For triggering stuff remotely, Vicrio Listener is the app of choice if you're Stream Deck and you're doing Companion. The only trick is for shutdown stuff. If there are any prompts that need attention, you'll still need to get a mouse over there or otherwise trigger those. But VicRail Listener is then the pro license, allows you to do more than just the basic mouse mapping and a few keystroke combinations. So
it's perfect. Next question.
Hasma Kajar, friend in Cape Town, South Africa, says, done 6 orientation meetings for an upcoming medical event. The terms and conditions include compulsory attendance for orientation. It's covering a learning management system, Discord, and Zoom. Zoom includes network, audio, lighting, framing, no virtual background. Can we share how we prep for events?
Usually we do a lot of those things. So, we trying to get a hold of someone, giving them a list of the things that they need to do. One thing that I will say is that the first thing we do is we say, hey, can you check your speed? And do you have an Ethernet? And do you have a couple things? There's a couple things we try to get out of the way as fast as we can over text. The orientations, we almost always have our orientation, like getting each speaker ready is always done one person at a time. We have a lot of clients that want to bring all 6 people in to prep them. The problem is that people become very uncomfortable when they're being picked at in front of other people, especially their peers. And it makes them it's a social problem, not really a technical problem. And it also eats up a lot of time. If I spend 15 minutes with you and there's 6 of you, that means everyone's sitting there for an hour and a half while we try to get everybody's thing working. And so we really want to spend that kind of time. So the real secret there is that we prep everybody. One person, we schedule a 30-minute call with every person that's going to be on a show, and we work through it with them to make sure that they're really ready to go. And we figured out where to go and what their camera and how their computer. Is there anything missing? We love doing these a week ahead of time. Sometimes we don't get to. But is there anything missing? Sometimes the client will jump in with us so that they feel better, I guess. Anyway, so but we kind of work through it. They might have a couple notes that they want to give as well. If we send out a kit, obviously we're helping them put the kit together. Those are the kind of things that we kind of work out. Then we love when we can to do a round table like a couple days before where they all talk about what they want to talk about. And then what we try to do for the shows when we're given the most control is we'll ask people to check in an hour and a half before. Just check in over Zoom and say hi. Like, I'm assuming you're talking about speakers. Check in and say hi and just let us know that they're there. If it's a VIP, we try to get their assistant to do that, et cetera. There's a couple reasons for that. The main reason is it tells us that they are set up an hour and a half before and they're not in their office when they said they were going to be at home or at home when they're in their office or somewhere else. It just is it sets a point, and again, it depends on how many people are going to be watching the show. Then usually we kind of let them loose once they've checked in. And we try to bring them back 20 minutes before, again, them or their assistant. There's a lot of times when for VIPs, we get them like 90 seconds before the show. But we ask for their assistant. The easiest ones are people who are very VIP or people who are not VIP at all, because the very VIP have support. The not VIP are just happy to be there. It's the ones that are pretty popular, but not super popular. They don't have an executive assistant, but they don't have time for you. Those are the worst. Those are the hardest ones. Not the worst, because they're oftentimes great speakers, but those are the hardest ones for us to prep. Because they just don't want to be there. And so, and they think it's silly because of all the bad habits that other virtual events have gotten into, which is, by the way, the 90 minutes to check in and 20 minutes to be there before the show, that's standard broadcast. We just took that from broadcast. We didn't make that up. Like when you're in the old days before the Zoomification and Skypeification of broadcast, when you were brought in, like when I was on a couple TV shows as a panelist, right? As one of the people that were in the windows, and they'd ask you to be there an hour and a half before, just check in, and then at 20 minutes. If you left your camera, your producer would call you in 30 seconds. Like someone would just be like, "Hey, how's it going? What are you doing? Can you sit down? We just want to see you." Because they're going to go up in front of 3 million people, and they're not, they don't want to have an empty chair, but they would get pretty tense about that. And we aren't as tense, but we still use that model because what the model achieves, that model that I just described, is a great show. Like, like it looks and sounds great. And we have to remember that while people are uncomfortable with it, what often happens is people forget that they didn't want to do this or they didn't want to do that. And then they look at it and they go, why didn't you tell me to fix that? Why didn't you help me get this? I looked like an idiot, like compared to all the other people or whatever. I didn't sound good. Why did that happen? And they get upset. At least we have emails to them like, hey, this is what we recommend, and we understand that you can't do it, but this is what we really recommend, so that when they look bad, it's not you. They go, oh, yeah, I got all those emails. And, so there's a little bit of CYA about asking for what you absolutely need. Like people, a lot of times producers will not ask for those things because, oh, they're too busy. You do want to ask for them. You can say, okay, and let them go through, but don't not ask. Like, go ahead and ask for what you need to do it well. And then let them say no, because then when it doesn't work, you're not the one holding the pin. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
There's nothing better than setting up a tech check with somebody and having them log on, and you just look at it and you're like, I could take the rest of the day off.
Yeah, exactly.
Or at least this next time.
So good.
Like every once in a while you get somebody and it just looks fantastic, and they've done, it's like, oh yeah, I do this all the time. It's like, thank you so much. How you doing? And then you just have a nice little chat with somebody. I will say this about group, I'm going to call it a group check.
Yeah.
There's been a few times when we'll get 3 or 4 people together, and there's the peer pressure kicks in much quicker. The peer pressure to like, oh, I want to look as good as that guy in that box over there. I want to look as good as Alice or Cindy Brady. And so that's a box reference.
We do it. We do it like the interrogation in a police thing. Going, well, Cindy is spending a lot of time on her background, and we just don't want you to look, not be able to keep up. You don't actually know what Cindy looks like, but we're like, if you're not going to answer the questions, I'm going to go talk to her, and I'm sure she's going to talk. That's kind of a little bit of that.
And obviously, with VIPs, sometimes they do want to just meet. If they're VIP enough, but there is some advantages. Sometimes it doesn't work though.
And the big thing is that we really try to underline, it's just our job to make you look as good as you possibly can. You're going to be in front of a couple hundred people. Normally you're on a stage and there's makeup and there's people and everything else, and you don't have those things. And what we want to do is make sure that, our job is to just make you look good. That's what we try to explain to people, is just to make you look and sound good, so that, and we talk a little bit about, you get a little more authority when you look better, then you'll exude more authority. If you look and sound better, and they go, oh yeah, and then some of them don't get it at all, and some are like, well, this is what I'm going to do. And then you go, okay. There's only so much. The other mistake people make is becoming too obstinate. Like if someone's an executive and they don't want to do it, you can tell them a couple times, but do not become like the person, because they'll leave and they'll call their assistant and go, I never want to talk to that person again, or whatever. And so you have to be it's a gentle, and that's where the real pro has to go in, is how hard can I push? Like that's what Shannon's really good at, is how hard can I push? Because we'll have clients that will say, oh no, keep asking. And Shannon's like, no, they're gone. Like they're not going to go any further than they've gone there. And you can't make them, and she'll push harder than I will for them to do the right thing. I'll tend to back off a little bit faster. Yeah, go ahead, David.
There's some disadvantage though too to coming in as heavy hitting as we do here. At least as I've seen it, where, some executives might see it as like, "Whoa, who are you?" But on the flip side, I've gotten requests for what mic I'm using, what camera, etc. So it's a fine line between love and hate.
Yeah, I definitely do it in a way knowing that I feel like you can't prep people if you don't look good. I can't tell people that they need to look better, and this is the new coat and tie, if I'm not treating it like the new coat and tie. And so, because then they'll be like, so you want to give them an example, and I think part of it is you want them to see the difference and hear the difference between them and a lot of times, Chris, I picked this up from Chris, is, hey, we're going to record a little test, and I make sure that it cuts from me talking to them, and then I'll send that to you. You can take a look at it and just see if it's at the end of the prep. See if that's what you want to do, and and that way they get this my frame and this mic, and then they hear theirs.
You want to
they
casually do that. You don't want to
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
"Now, look how good I look."
No. I just go.
Look how
We're just going to send you a
bad you
test.
look.
We're going to send you a real quick test. What I've gotten into the habit, started to get into the habit of, is going. I'm going to send you a real quick test so that you can just see what you look like, and just think if there's any notes that you want to do or if you have any questions for us. And then I just and send it to them, and it just says, "Hey," you hear me saying that, and then they jump on for a second and they talk, and so then they just get to see the cliff, And if they don't. If they don't think that cliff is a big deal, then I never say another thing. If they do think it's a big deal, then they'll call back. You just kind of leave it up to them to have it go. But I will say that, this process, what you always hope for is you get an organization that you get to do it a couple times. Because what happens is if you spend a bunch of energy on the people who are passionate, like, oh, how do I make it better? Make sure that they look great. Like whatever, like sometimes we'll send them things even if we didn't plan to or whatever. We want to make them look great if they're really passionate. And the reason for that is they embarrass everybody else. so they look really good and they feel really good about themselves. But people who are the funny thing about executives, they tend to be a little they have a self-worth and they see themselves up against that and they're like, what happened? And we're like, well, we told you could do the thing. Next question.
Next one comes to us from John Nichols in Concord, California. I have custom in-ear monitors that need a new cable. They're IPX cables. I'm seeing a lot of variation in price. This is for meetings versus stage performance. I have the Linsole in-ear monitors, but thought it might be worth using the custom ones. Any guidance?
And I'm not sure. I'm not used to calling them IPX cables, so I'm not sure if they're. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I looked them up. It's a little. It's kind of those cables that we've seen in some of the tearaway ones. They're a little non-standard cable, but we've seen them a lot around. And I was just going to mention if you're switching out people a lot, the acoustic tubes that most of these work with, but I don't think that's what you're doing. I'm thinking you're just thinking if it goes wrong, I want a better or a backup one.
Yeah, these IPX are just slightly different than the Linsoles as far as how they insert. I have to admit that I've gotten pretty embedded into the Linsoles as my in-ears. The custom ones are good. I don't actually find custom ones. A lot of times they're harder plastic, and I actually don't find them very comfortable. So I've had custom molds made, and I just found I didn't like them. Maybe I just didn't get the right ones, but I've had them done by a couple of pretty good companies, and the ones that I had in my ear, I just didn't find very comfortable over many hours of usage in a given day. I found that when I took them out, my ears hurt just a little bit, like it just pushed a little too hard as far as, and so I've been pretty happy with the Linsoles. Next question.
Kyle Hammond in Chicago, Illinois. Maybe a question for a different day, but is there a plan to bring back the ZoomISO test breakout room?
We'd like to. We're waiting for some stuff to come out and for us to work on some stuff. I think that it's just setting up 12 PCs to do this. We got to find a better way to do high density outputs. And so we just don't have a solution for that right now. We'd love to put the breakout room in there, but we have to have a higher density than having 12 blades, outputting people. Yeah, go ahead, David.
I have a bunch of key pros at my disposal. If you need any help, let me know.
Thanks. 12 key pros. Oh, there you go. I mean, what I'll let you know there. No, that could be interesting. Because what I would like to do is have something where we schedule it like it's, I was hoping to do it with some kind of computer where we go, hey, from 4 to 6, it's a 4-person talk. And from this time, it's a 6-person. And from this person, it's a 12. So you can test different things because if you do 12, then there's a lot of times that people aren't talking. Like if you only get 6 of them or whatever. And so the idea is to build a couple different ones. And then the other idea that we had was like, well, let's shoot a concert that way. So you have a bunch of ISOs of concerts. You can just cut a concert or shoot a corporate or shoot a bunch of different things. So we have some ideas on what we want to do. It's just a matter of figuring out the resources to do it. So stay tuned as we work on resources.
Be more than happy to help.
Okay. We'll talk more. Next question.
John Fisher, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. General question, budgeting for a new zoom camera lens combo. What's a good lens to pair with a Sony ZV-E10 that will provide some depth of field? The front of the lens will be approximately 30 inches from the face and background, and the background is 5 to 7 feet away from at an angle, receding at an angle.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Generally, depth of field is a combination of sensor size and the aperture, or how big the hole that is letting the light hit the sensor is. Usually if you look at the f-stop on a camera, and if the camera goes down to anything below maybe f2.3, you have a decent shot on a camera with a big sensor. Now, I don't know the ZV-10, I don't know its sensor size. The problem comes when you get into camcorders and things that have very small sensors. It's almost impossible to get much shallow depth of field out of those.
The E10 is a Super 35.
Super 35. So you'll have a shot at doing this. So make sure you don't get an f4 or an f5.6 aperture in there, and you probably should be able to get some softness out of that.
Yeah, I mean, the cheapest way to go is to get a 50 millimeter 1.8 or 1.2 or 1.4. 50 millimeters tend to be pretty inexpensive as far as getting a relatively high quality one that you can get there. I have my wife uses an E10, and so with a 50 it might have been a 35 millimeter 1.8. And there's a lower cost one than the G series that is a little more affordable, $300 or $400. So the whole thing's going to cost you about $1,000. She's using a Super 35 at about maybe a little bit more than 30 inches, but it's close to 30 to 48 inches distance, and it frames up pretty well. It is a fixed one. You can get a zoom. The problem is the zoom will give you. In this case, when you only have 5 to 7 feet behind you, you're going to want to get down to a pretty wide aperture, so a 1.8 or 2.8. And zoom is going to cost you a lot to get to a 2.8. So if you go to a 2.8 zoom, a 24 to 70 zoom, which is a great lens to put onto that, but a 24-70 zoom at 2.8 is a G series, and that's going to cost you $1,500 for the lens, at least. And so those are the challenges that you have. I do agree with Bill. You don't want to do smaller apertures like 4 or 5.6 or variable. That's even worse. And so those are things you want to kind of take into account. But I think that you'd find that, where I would start is probably an E10 with a Super 35, or an A10 but I always buy lenses for full frame, not for APC. And the reason I do that is so that if I ever go to full frame, which I generally always think I'm going to do, you're going to go through a lot of cameras. You're not going to go through as many lenses. So yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think that camera is an APS-C, at least the one I found on Amazon.
Yeah, Super 35. Super 35 APS-C.
You're right. And the kit lens that comes with this one is only an f4, so it may not give you if you're looking for that shot. You said you're looking for some depth of field. I assume you mean shallow depth of field.
Yeah.
For a good bokeh. And the 16 to 50 is the kit lens that comes on there. If you use that, use it wide open and use it at the longer end at the 50. But it may have to be further away than 30 inches. So
50 is going to have to be further. Like I'm on a
mind.
Yeah, I'm on a I'm on a 35 millimeter at 48 inches away.
So what's the f-stop on that lens?
Oh, mine's a 1.4. 1.4. Set to 1.4. And my background is like 10 feet behind me. So yeah. I open it all the way up. Next question.
Next question comes from Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota. Had a problem viewing a YouTube video from B&H on my iPad 9 using the YouTube app. It was giving me severe crop. Is there something I'm missing?
You can double tap it and it will zoom in to a different field. So make sure to double tap it again and see if it opens that back up again. So it's easy for you to accidentally, while you're setting up a YouTube TV or on YouTube, to double tap it and it'll zoom up. And that should fix it. I think it's zooming up so that it's full frame vertically across the 16:9. So it's like center cutting for you or moving around. But you should be able to double tap it and it should back up again. Next question.
Kern in Maine says, any recommendations for a high-end PC laptop to run OBS? And this is another QR code question.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, some of these gaming laptops, like the MSI Stealth series, I was looking at this earlier this morning, is pretty high-end. I mean, you can configure these things upwards of $3,000, and these things actually have a magnesium chassis, so they're made out of pretty high-end components. You can get them with the latest Intel processors as well. and I just lost my mouse on that computer, so I can't scroll down. But yeah, these ones are really good. You can get them with the latest Intel processors and high-end NVIDIA 4070 graphics cards with 32 gigs of onboard memory. So I don't know heat-wise or battery-wise how those operate. You probably want to run them on a power supply, not battery, in production anyways. But if you got to go PC, something like that.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I agree with Alexander. The MSI makes some great gaming laptops. Make sure they do have the NVIDIA 4070 or 4060s at least. And always run them plugged in, because they will, especially the newer processors, will go to the economy cores if you unplug them rather than the performance cores. So make sure you keep it plugged in all the time you're running OBS on it.
Well, there we go. A lot of questions still left. We had 2 hours of questions. We got through as many as we could as we worked through this. If we push your questions back, just a quick reminder: if they came in over the QR code, they'll come back in tomorrow. If they came in, if you posted them, we send them back to you. We don't throw them away. So those are going back to you. They're in your little notes section on your little hamburger in the upper right in Mukana, so you can bring them back in tomorrow. Tomorrow's 2 hours of Q&A as well. So definitely bring those questions back in, and we'll have another round of questions to cover for tomorrow. So, but thank you to all the great questions. It's a really short show if you, as the producers, don't ask a lot of questions, and you did. you kept us going for 2 straight hours. Really, really well done. And a great set of questions. And, the voting matters too. So as you look at those things, as you vote on those questions, it keeps the show really tight, because you're voting on the questions that you want to see next. So make sure to use that tool inside of Mukana. Thanks to the panelists, of course. The 2 hours would be a very long 2 hours if we got lots of questions and no panelists, or very few panelists. So having you and David, we haven't seen David in a long time. It was really fun to have David Brady in here hanging out with us. But thanks to all the panelists for being part of the of what we're doing here. We can't do this without you. And thanks to the incredible team on the back end that's developing the software, that's figuring out what we're going to talk about, that is cutting the actual show, managing all these questions. It's a small village every single day that makes this possible, and we really appreciate your contribution to the show. We traveled 147,000 miles today. Wow. 237,000 kilometers. That is 1.169 billion bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. So much potassium. We covered a lot of ground here today.
I think that's plastasium.
What? Hey, Alex, do you know about what city roughly where you're going to be for the eclipse?
I can't remember now.
What's it called in Discord? I can't find it in Discord.
I think it's a private one. I think you have to sign up for it. So, but sign up for the Eclipse group. Yeah. I don't think.
How do I sign up for that?
Ping Josh. I'm not sure exactly where that is.
All right.
But we're meeting every Tuesday, I think, and we
All
talk
right.
about it, make plans. We're working with partners and figuring out.